rather pithy line. We're all in this alone.
Oh, goodness. Well, I would just like to say I was doing a little bit of reading about Passover before our conversation today, and what struck me again was the role of the stories. Mm-hmm. And you have shared different stories with us, Rabbi Tom, at different conversations and as a reflection sometimes at the end. And that we oftentimes, I wondered about the stories that will come out of COVID, come out of these past 2 years, because there are some stories of joy and there are some sad stories and such. But I thought that was an interesting element, was the aspect of stories.
Stories central. The book that we read on Passover, the service that we have out of the home, is called the Haggadah. And the word Haggadah, the Hebrew word ha means the, and Agada, or more formally Agadah, means story. So it is the story. And yes, each part of the point of having a home-based celebration is every person who's grown up in a Jewish home has their Passover story memories. This is how we do it in our family, and it's going to be different from how you do it in your family. There are tons of Haggadot. There are tons of different versions of this. Each appealing or speaking in a particular voice to a particular set of people.
Good evening, everyone. We have a quorum. There are 7 members in chambers, and Chana Keopanya is remote. And with
Recording
that,
in progress.
Okay. We all set with that? Yeah. That happened a lot at the council meeting, I think, the other night, or some meeting. In any event, we're calling the meeting to order. It's the May 12th budget hearing. And as I said, we have a quorum, 7 in chambers, 1 remote. And with that, I'll ask if there's any public comments. Hearing none, we'll now move on to the approval of minutes. There are no minutes to approve, so we'll dispense with that pretty quickly. And the next thing is to resume our budget hearing. Tonight we have education, and we're starting off with Franklin Public Schools, then we're doing Tri-County, and then Norfolk Aggie. So without further ado, Sarah, do you want to come up and your team and introduce any members you'd like to?
Can I make a quick intro?
Absolutely.
So through the chair, just as a quick lead-in, account 300, I just want to point out, which is the Franklin Public School District. We do anticipate the superintendent of Tri-County attending as well at some point, a little bit. But I just want to do a quick overview. So in the proposed town administrator's budget, in account 300, we're proposing a $2.4 million increase over FY22, which notably is able to get the Franklin Public School District over the $70 million appropriation mark. I do want to note this is the amount requested by the superintendent and school committee. I think the superintendent and school business officer will go through a few more of the details about how they're going to meet the rest of their need for the fiscal year coming up. But a lot of people have asked me recently, how did we do this from several months ago, where things might have looked a little more bleak? And there's really 2 reasons for it. Well, there's more, but the 2 really most important ones are, number one, as we look through the revenues that were coming through the end of March of this year, and that regulations were coming off the books from COVID. We looked at the trends with revenues, particularly as we've talked about at this meeting before, hotel revenues and some of the other licensing revenues coming through the building commissioner, motor vehicle excise, as well as the new cannabis sales tax that's in place. We still do not have a great figure on that fully for a full year, but looking out into FY23 and talking to the stores that are in town, there is optimism that those revenues will stay at least consistently on the upward trend. And the second reason is what highlighted today, and Miriam can also speak to this, I'm being serious. This isn't the biggest reason, but it did really crystallize for me earlier. Health insurance is another reason why we were able to be here tonight. I know we talked about it the other night in the benefits budget, but we had a benefits fair today, and it was our first in 3 years. The Human Resources Director on the town side, Karen Bratt, and the school HR office really started this 4 years ago. It's a great service for employees where you bring in all the benefits vendors into the library, and employees can stop by and have good old-fashioned face-to-face discussions with representatives of our benefits programs. But one of the things that you'll notice in the budget is the town health insurance benefits line item went up a marginal amount. The reason why that's happening is because a lot of our employees are taking advantage of the health savings account high deductible offering. And it couldn't have been any more evident to me today than we were up at the benefits fair and seeing a lot of our employees actually helping other employees coming into the room and educating them on the health savings account plan, which we've said for years we're all on, and it's a smart decision, but it really helps save the town, the schools, and the employee on their premiums. And this year in particular, just being up there earlier, I have to give a plug to our good friend Joe Corey, who was probably who barely took a break or a breath. He's been a part of our insurance advisory committee of all of our units, and Joe has been a great troubadour, as well as many employees in the police and fire and DPW, of trying to educate a lot of employees on the numbers for health insurance, how it affects them, how they can benefit from these plans and these ideas. And I would note that a lot of the myths of this program have been dispelled. We saw a lot of individuals and employees converting over from the HMO plan to the health savings account today. There's numbers in the budget narrative that track this out in terms of the success, but it was really encouraging to see a lot of employees show up for a face-to-face exercise today, and I talked to a few of employees too and helped educate them. We're also seeing a lot of employees converting to that at the age of 26, where a lot of younger employees are coming off their parents' plan. It's a change of life event, and I just want to give a huge thanks to Miriam, the school HR office, Sue and Lisa, as well as our incredible Human Resources Director, Karen Bratt, for organizing these over the last couple of years. And it was great to have face-to-face, and we saw a lot of people signing up and converting over to that high deductible plan. I would note, despite urban myth, the vast majority of employees actually never hit the deductible, the high deductible. And that's a key feature in part of the way that we're educating the employees about why that plan is even more financially advantageous for them, and why in the long run, particularly if you're a younger employee, we all tell them our stories. I wish I had that option 25 years ago. I know Miriam does too. We all would be able to, you know, at 65, be able to have a nice nest egg there. And so those are really the two big reasons why over the last couple months we were able to really shift the dynamics in the budget and be able to meet the school department and school committee's request for their budget. So thank you. Appreciate the ability to have a few comments before the school department goes, and now I'll be happy to obviously turn it over to the superintendent.
Thank you, Jamie. Dr. Hen?
Thank you. Nice to see everybody this evening. Thanks for having us. I'm joined by Miriam Goodman, our school business administrator, and also here at the table is Dave McNeil, who is on the school committee and the chair of the budget subcommittee. Denise Spencer, chair of school committee, Dave Callahan, and school committee member Elise Stokes are also in the audience, and want to be sure to recognize them. So in your packet and in the budget materials from the town administrator, you have our executive summary of the school committee's approved budget at this point. And I would just say a few remarks to preface it, and then we'd be happy to answer questions and hear your comments. If I could impress upon you what school is like these days, it may feel or seem like things are back to normal, so to speak. Masks are encouraged or recommended at this point in time, but no longer required, as one example. And a lot of our pandemic responses and protocols have lessened over time, but we are still, of course, dealing with some of the educational after effects of having disrupted schooling. And so this budget really thinks towards the future and our graduates and what they're going to need for their futures and success, while recognizing too that disrupted schooling has taken its toll on both students academically as well as their mental health needs. We are also looking to be very strategic in our application of operating funds and how we're applying our operating funds to meet student needs, while also strategically spending some of our remaining relief funding, the ESSER funding, which allows us to spend for 2 more years into FY24. And so those relief funds, I think, have been really helpful in shoring up resources for kids, and are leaving us at this point in a position of being able to put forward and support this budget. We appreciate the town administrator's support of a $2.4 million increase. Typically, and this was presented in his summary back in March, typically we're looking at a $3 to a $3.4 million increase in the school department budget year over year to meet contractual demands and other budget drivers. But we are also looking to make some prepaying tuition, additional application of revolving funds, as well as we're keeping very careful tabs on our enrollment and making sure that our staffing adjusts to that. We do have some investment initiatives, so to speak, to the tune of $1.3 million in this budget. If I could just summarize where we are and put it in context for you, our enrollment overall has been decreasing for some time. The elementary schools have leveled off and are relatively stable. We're seeing enrollment decreases now making its way through the middle school and the high school. This is a common trend and a common pattern that's happening across a lot of districts. At the same time, though, what we're seeing is an increased level of need among our students, more diversity among our students, more neurodiversity among our students, more students who are not English speakers as their first language. And so many of the additions to this budget in terms of positions meet students' special education needs or are targeted towards supporting the required English language development teaching that they need in order to become English proficient. We are also, as I said, attending to students' academic needs coming out of the pandemic, and so there's additional support with, for example, a literacy specialist who works hand in hand with our teachers to make sure that students' literacy skills are developing and that we're catching kids who are falling behind with that, and putting in interventions to help them be reading on grade level. We also have some curriculum leadership in order to shore up some guaranteed and viable curriculum at our middle schools. We also recognize students' mental health needs, social emotional needs, and so with operating funds, we're maintaining an increased level of staffing in terms of counselors to make sure that we're attending to students' mental health in that way. We are also seeing some additional behaviors among children, so we're putting in an additional assistant principal at the Keller Elementary School in terms of adjusting to that larger school population, having had Davis Thayer and Keller Elementary School merged together this past year. And we feel like that's going to provide a lot of support to every single teacher and every single student in that school. So that's just kind of a high-level summary of some of the areas of need that we're seeing. And I guess to reiterate, we are also carefully looking at our revolving funds to make sure that we're spending those appropriately and putting those towards the budget in order to put forward this request to the FinCom and then to the Town Council. Dave, do you want to add anything to that?
Thank you for having us this evening. Just really like to reiterate that just the wonderful work that Sarah and Miriam have done putting this budget together. It's a fiscally responsible budget. I believe about 2 months ago when we were all here for joint budget subcommittee, we pointed out we saw that the projected level funding across the town, and already the budget that Miriam Sarah had put together was, the request was below that level funding, and so I think it really reiterates just how much we are doing with this budget to provide for the necessary and targeted services to Franklin students while still being responsible to the Franklin taxpayers. As Sarah just mentioned, what we're investing in are truly needs that are very specific right now, particularly with our students coming out of the pandemic and looking forward, and really maximizing all that we're doing with our investment initiatives and really meeting the moment, exactly what Franklin students need right now, and ensuring that we are addressing that. So, yeah, thank you for your consideration. I ask for your support.
I have some questions, but I'll defer to the end, so I'll kick it around to members of the committee if you have any questions for the schools.
I have a quick question.
Natalie?
So you talk a little bit about declining enrollment. So is some of what's happening in salaries and whatnot, and you talked about specifically addressing the needs of, specifically addressing the needs of the students, is some of the transition that's happening are you having to shift potentially like teachers down in some situations, but then enhancing other areas?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what we're looking to do. So we're keeping tabs on enrollment and through kind of resignations or retirements, making some strategic decisions as to whether or not that position is going to be replaced, while always keeping in line with school committee guidelines related to class size. So we want to make sure that we're following that. And so we're making some of those decisions. But at the same time, you'll see kind of the salary area, it does increase. I mean, there's some contractual obligations, but there are also positions that we kind of need to make sure we're adding in order to support those needs and enhance services for students based on what they're presenting to us.
Got it, okay, thank you, that's a good clarification, because I think that would be kind of people's questions, is like, why is it enrolling, but we're seeing things increase, so I think that's a important differentiation of what's happening.
Yep, and I think that's a message that I've heard from other superintendents and other school committees and other communities. I think it's something that is really pretty common and reflective of where we are.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else? George?
I have a few things. How many teachers do we actually have?
I think Miriam probably has that number.
503.
How many was it in, say, 2012? You got a guess?
I think you'll see that our our educator staff overall has remained reasonably level. Our classroom teachers have declined to keep up with enrollment trends, as you've just heard. But our needs have shifted to meet the needs of students. And so, as Dr. Ahern just mentioned, we have more specialized positions like counselors, psychologists, nurses, to meet the needs of students at this point in time.
I did a little digging today, and just curiosity, I know there's no easy answers, okay? Since 2012, I picked a 10-year period. The enrollment has dropped 24+%. The budget has gone up 29%. And our contribution has gone from, the town's contribution, I guess, has gone from $8,600 a student to $15,055 or thereabouts. I know there's no quick answer to what, when you think about it, when the student population dropped 25% and the budget has gone up 30%, it's kind of a, if you look at them this way, well, whatever, I feel like the bird.
Sure.
one's going up at a rapid rate and the other one's going down at a rapid rate. As an old person looking at this, I wonder how, there is no easy answer, I assume. Is there? And I understand costs have gone crazy, particularly lately, but that is a kind of a dramatic change in how we do it.
I think a lot's changed in 10 years, and I think it gets a little bit at what was just asked related to staffing. Staffing is our #1 area of expense, and a lot has changed. I think there are more expectations on schools now than ever. You know, some of the positions that we've added that would drive up some of those costs include nurses, additional nursing staff, additional counselors, additional school psychologists. Those are some of the positions that we've added and are proposing to keep and requesting to keep, because we are still in the aftermath of the pandemic, and we are still responding there. As Miriam had said, classroom teachers has gone down, kind of commensurate with student enrollment going down, and we really do keep tabs on class size. But the needs have just, I think, exponentially increased, and there's a lot of expectations on schools where in the past, other social agencies, other social services might take that on out in the community, but there's less of those services and less of those resources out, and so it does at times feel like everybody's turning to the schools to really address and attend to all of those needs. I would also share too that we have, as I mentioned, more neurodiversity. We have more students that are presenting with different learning profiles and special education identifications and diagnoses that need very specialized services. We are, to Dave's point, very fiscally responsible, and Miriam's done some of the numbers around our specialized programs and having students in Franklin in our specialized programs. And first and foremost, it's great for the kids because they are staying in their home community. It is great for all students to build more awareness and friendship and inclusivity with their peers, but it is also fiscally responsible. The state has said that what is adequate to educate a child has gone up. It's increased, and they redid their formula back in 2015-ish in acknowledgement of rising healthcare costs and the additional expense it takes to educate students for whom English is not a first language, special education students, and students from low socioeconomic backgrounds. So those are some of the factors, and as I could go on and on and on, because to your, you answered.
I said it wasn't an easy answer.
It's not an
I
easy
understand
answer.
that.
We also have escalating healthcare costs. We're fortunate this year, but there have been times where healthcare costs in 1 year have been upwards of 8, 9, 10%. We also have escalating transportation costs and out-of-district tuitions, which we don't have a lot of control over. So the students, we do try to, we have every student in the least restrictive environment. We, like I said, have been actively building some programs to keep students in district, but there are times where the team makes the decision for a student to go out of district, and they are tuitioned out, and the increase of those tuitions is actually something that's not very much in our control. Fortunately, the state has helped out with respect to the circuit breaker reimbursement, and that's been pretty stable lately. That's a commitment from the state related to the Student Opportunity Act, is that circuit breaker reimbursement being fully funded at 75%. But those out-of-district tuitions are some of the escalating costs that we see that we really don't have a lot of control over. But we do our best, always keeping in mind that we want the student in the most appropriate placement.
The other thing that I looked at today was, there's a lot of talk every time about contribution per pupil. We're at around, what, 15,000 right
Per
now?
pupil.
15, whether, what's interesting is if you look at the DESE so, I think it's the DESI website, one of the state websites in any case, and you take out the absurd outliers, example, Provincetown spends $45,000 per student. $45,000, we're at 15. And you take out the low, the one, the small districts out in the western part of the state, New Salem, and all that stuff, which are 8 or 9 or 10, and then you take out the bottom 25 when you work your way back up to Weston and Wellesley and Dover and Sherburne, and suddenly it doesn't look all that out of line with the rest of them. I mean, you got to get rid of those. I mean, that's just an absurd. When I was reading, I said, how can anybody even compare that list to anything? And yet it seems to be a question people ask all the time. How much per person? He's got something.
I just think, Mr. Jarrett, you raise a good point in the global sense. I hope nobody shoots the messenger on this one, but there's a stat for every argument, and I think you can move it a lot of different ways around to make a cogent point about a dynamic. And you're raising one, others would say other things. I agree when you look at P-Town or others and you see these distorted statistics. It's the same thing we go through every year with tax rates. Why does Wellesley and Cambridge have the lowest tax rates in the state? They love pitching that. And people go, huh? It's because they also have the highest home values in the state of Massachusetts. And so that's why I try to always focus on the dollar amounts in terms of where the money is, what the quantity of total dollars is. We've joked about percentages before, and why we don't want to distort what's happening. And I think those are real dollars that are obviously getting poured into the school district, that is being split up. And I think we do get really bogged down in data points. Where do we rank? What's the number? Where are we going up or down? And that's why I traditionally resisted percentages all over the place, because it's a statistic that deviates from, I think, some of the important points is, what is it that the Franklin Public School District needs to adequately educate a child to achieve the goals of what the school committee and superintendent are looking for those children to get when, in a few weeks, when they graduate and they go out into the world, how are we preparing that student? And that's a difficult, substantive, dense conversation that oftentimes, we don't have the time for. And so we rely on statistical bullet points to try to frame things in a way that, you're right, George. I'm sure there's a lot of folks watching on Franklin TV saying $45,000 a student. Well, they're getting a raw deal, but it's really a statistic that it comes to fruition from a whole different set of metrics. So, I can see your point, and there's always a statistic for everybody to make up their argument.
Yeah, well, what's the saying? Figures don't lie, but liars figure. It may fit in here.
You call me a liar? No, I'm just kidding.
I
was just kidding.
I think it's a good point about Provincetown in particular as an outlier, so we can.
Do you know where New Salem is? Did you look on a map?
I've actually been there
Yeah.
once.
Yeah. Hopefully you didn't go swimming.
It's out in the Berkshires, is the way I look at it.
No, Quabbin.
The only other, this is a pet peeve, okay, and I admit it, and my sister lives across the street, or did, from between the high school and Norrisman. And I watched bus after bus after bus after bus go by with 6 kids, 10 kids, in a 55-seat bus. And then I live on Sherman Ave. To get to the Stop and Shop, the easiest way is up Panther Way and out and up, because you don't have to go through the stupid lights at the church. I don't think, does anybody take a bus besides a few? Because there are 8 million SUVs blocking every road for an hour around there. And I realize this is just a pet peeve. I'm sure that, and I figured why not give it to you?
I think it's a good question, and we can talk certainly about buses and routing and efficiencies that we do. I'm curious if that's at the end of the day versus arrival?
Yeah, no, that's.
Or is
I'm-
it dismissal?
I'm not up early, that's.
That's
the
dismissal.
end of the day.
So I think if you're seeing that at dismissal, what I think that's a reflection of is just the success of our after-school programs and the clubs and activities and athletics and music and arts that happens after school. So I think if you saw Arrival, you'd see a different image in terms of how many students are taking the bus. And Miriam works with the transportation department to do the routing.
Yeah, and I would also say, you know, we're transporting 2,600 kids on 30 buses.
2,600 out of 4,600?
Yeah.
Wow.
It used to be more, but I think the pandemic has decreased ridership as families have preferred to do the drop-off, which is why you're seeing more cars and such. I think people have been, you know, just reluctant to be enclosed in the space, have their child be enclosed in the space for a long duration.
And I would also add, you know, you might be seeing late buses on their way home at, you know, 3:15 or thereabouts, and those buses run with very few students, but it's an opportunity for students to participate in clubs and have a place, have a ride home. But this year, we were only able to run 2 late buses out of the high school, instead of 5 that we run through the middle schools as well. So that might be what you're seeing. Our elementary buses, I would agree with you when you say they're not full, but they certainly have, you know, more than 5 or 6 kids on them. And there are other buses that pass through Franklin to get to different places as well, so.
Okay.
And we want to be mindful too of the length of the route, so that's another factor. And so that also is something that kind of controls how many students might be riding on the bus. What I will say is I've had some calls, maybe not this year again because ridership's down, but in the past with people concerned that there's too many kids on their bus. So we do try to run as efficiently as possible.
One number that I was surprised at, frankly, in that I gotta get a life. I'm not looking at numbers. The administrative costs for Franklin is relatively low as compared to on the DESI list, and I'm calling it the DESI list, I don't know what web sheet, what it was. Which frankly surprised me a little bit. He's saying,
Doesn't
my
surprise me at all.
editorial guy over there, but it was, I don't remember the number, but it was better than most. That's the one we ought to do instead of the stupid 15,000 or whatever it is. That would make sense.
That one does make sense.
Okay,
No, I think if you look at other communities our size, they have a lot more administrative support in the central office.
And
okay.
if I could really quickly on that point, you know, it's certainly not my decision to make, you know, but, you know, to that point that the superintendent just made about comparables, and we've just went through this ourselves, and we talked about staffing levels last night at public safety. You know, there is at times needed investments to make a community of this size and an organization of this size move forward. And so I appreciate you very much pointing that out because we are not a very top-heavy organization. And I can speak working in this building every day, you know, the dedication and the talent of the central office and administrative staff for both the municipal and the school side is certainly elite. But when I watch folks moving around, clicking buttons, payroll, all these different aspects of things, you know, it is something that as we move forward and continue to grow, particularly as the district does, it's something that we're going to have to monitor for sure. Because at some point, you just need to make investments. And we're a very bottom-heavy organization. We invest in police officers. We're trying to move the ball down the field on that. Same thing with paramedics. Same thing with teachers. Same thing with cafeteria workers, whatever the dynamic is. But as we continue to grow, you know, there is going to be a need for some administrative staff, and I hope the community can certainly rally around that to support those investments when they're there. Thank you.
All set?
I think I'm done.
Any questions, Tyrell?
Yeah, I was just curious, how do you track kind of those need changes, you know, whether that's kind of the number of students that are now on IEPs or different programs, kind of, how do you do that in order to allocate those resources? And is that something where, just to kind of offset the idea that the decline in enrollment's been down 25%, kind of if the needs are there, is there kind of a similar figure you could show saying, you know, well, that's the needs are up 300%, and we can show that they're being used because they're, you know, the school counselors are always busy or whatever that might be. It would just be very good to kind of understand how that works.
Sure. So the budget development process is really a team effort. You know, certainly the school committee plays a part, and they have kind of a monitoring focus on our efforts. We also have an administrative team who works with, in particular, their school councils, if they're building administrators, and school councils are designed as governance bodies to kind of put budget requests forward and to talk about matters of governance, including budgetary needs. And then we also have our central office administrators, two of whom are here tonight, Lucas Jagir, Assistant Superintendent, and Paula Morano, who is our Director of Student Services. And there's a lot of data gathered, in particular in the area of student services, around numbers of students and the services that they need and counseling staff. And I know she reviews schedules and caseloads. We talked about caseloads at a recent school committee meeting, just to sort of monitor. We talk about class sizes, but they're also looking at caseloads. And the numbers don't tell everything, particularly when you look at in a child's IEP. You have to look at the services and the minutes of specialized instruction that they're receiving. So they're monitoring and gathering and capturing a lot of data in the Office of Student Services. And through the budget development process, it's very iterative. They put forward you know, requests, and we have kind of a back and forth making and deciding and determining what some priorities would be. Similarly, in the English language learning department, where there's data collected when students enter. They take a home language survey. We keep track of their language proficiency. There are annual assessments through the state called Access to see how they're progressing in terms of their English language development. And we keep track. We have a person who works part-time, a retired administrator works part-time to help coordinate that program. And she knows all of the students, their language proficiency levels, what languages they speak, how they're progressing. And so there's a lot of data there. And then scheduling the teachers around that and how many minutes of instruction they're supposed to get are all things that we keep tabs on. And we had a very big conversation this year in particular about the English language learners. We've been very, very stable in the district with roughly 70 students every year. This year it spiked. We're close to 100 English language learners in the district now. And we're seeing more students who are newcomers or beginners in terms of their language proficiency, and we're seeing more students with limited or interrupted formal education. So that requires an additional, as you might imagine, additional services to provide to those students. And that's a trend that I could foresee continuing. You know, districts are bringing refugees into the schools, and so I could see that as a trend that continues going forward. So we do have some additional staffing there. So there's a lot of data collected by various offices, and it kind of all gets considered when we think about where the priorities are in the budget.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All set? All set there? A few items for me, Dr. Ahern. The first one's a relatively small item. It was a new item this year, and I just don't recall what it's for. It's 1230 function code, district administration. It's going from half an FT, it's 27,000, going to 28.4.
Yep, so that is for the split position for the marketing and communication specialist. Part of that is funded by the school department, and the other part is funded by the town.
Okay, great, thank you.
And she's
pardon
in
me?
part responsible, if I can just
Oh, for
share.
the one
These
thing.
are some of the things that she produces. in addition to helping us with some communications.
And a couple of other items. One is, going through the budget, and especially the student service section, one thing for me is glaring, though I know it's gonna come back to probably federal money or something, is food services. There's nothing there.
Oh, yep, you are spot on. It comes back to the federal government. Miriam, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so student services is partially being funded through a circuit breaker reimbursement for tuition. And so that offset is higher next year by about $310,000 or thereabouts. We've also we're in a position now to be able to prepay some tuition for next year, so we've reduced that line item up accordingly. So that is really the reason why that budget has decreased. Other items that are being funded on some of our federal grant money are going to be for our ESSER III funding that's coming up in the next couple of years, for specialized classrooms, for expansion of our goals program. We have a new dyslexia program that we're looking at. There's a program for youth that transition back into schools after, for example, a hospitalization placement. So we have some counselors in there, and all of those things are impacting where our new positions may end up, because they're going to be funded through those federal grants.
So the food program then specifically, is that the National School Lunch Program or?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Did
the
he say
food-
food?
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, food services, yeah.
I'm sorry, I thought you said student service. I'm
So the
sorry.
Well, it's under that
services
budget, I
line.
think.
So I apologize.
That's okay.
I heard student services. So the food service line, food services is a self-supporting program. So when students pay for lunch, that money is used to support the program overall. When, in the past 2 years, lunch has been free because of the pandemic, and breakfast as well. So the reimbursements that are coming in from the federal government are a little bit higher, in fact, than they have ever been because of the pandemic. So generally, we don't have any money supporting from the budget to support the food service program. It is self-sufficient. The few items that you see there were pieces of equipment that might have been purchased towards the end of the year that we needed at one point in time. So I'm sorry for
That's
my
okay.
misunderstanding. I heard the word student services.
And
not food
I'm gonna bring up out-of-district tuition in a moment, but just to follow up on the food thing, even though there's nothing there, like the rec department they self-fund also, but we see a budget for them. So just what is the cost, school system-wide, for food service? That'd be the cafeteria people and their salaries and
Yeah,
just the
that-
cost of
That's about a
feeding people.
$1.5 million operation overall.
1.5? Okay. And so the government covers even our salaries and health insurance costs? Well, you're saying actually the kids' fees, Pay for that, right.
Well, so the meals have been free this year and
Right.
last year, so that cost was picked up in whole by the federal government for reimbursements. On any given year, it's either through fees, a portion of the reimbursement from the government, which generally tends to be about $400,000 to $600,000, depending on the number of meals served. And then any other revenue that we might take in from other types of catering events, which we don't do a lot of that. We focus primarily on feeding students, but that's generally where that lies. I mean, we're looking at about a $1.5 million operation, and with right now, we don't anticipate that lunches and breakfasts meals are gonna be free next year, because the USDA hasn't extended that opportunity for districts. It is something that is currently included in the Senate Ways and Means budget that just came out. So we would encourage that to continue to go forward for families. But it is a self-supporting program.
Okay, thank you. And one quick follow-up to that. If I recall, in summer of 20 and 21, you don't normally have the school lunch program in the summertime, correct?
We do not.
But you did extend it for those 2 summers?
We did, and.
Are you
and,
doing it for 22?
Right now, there is not a plan to continue summer programming because we're not being funded for that. Because of those 2 years being funded through the government, we were able to offer that. At this point, for the current upcoming summer, we don't have the funding for that program
Okay.
anymore.
And one other thing on the out-of-district tuition, we spoke about this quite a bit about 18 months ago when, you know, the schools kicked off our deep dive series. And one thing, I did notice the circuit breaker funds being applied, so there's actually a big decrease, but in your narrative, you mentioned that the budgeted rate increase is like 5%, that's 5% on the existing $4.5 million that we're spending in FY '22. So without the circuit breaker money, it'd be like 4.8 or something.
It's, the total cost for out-of-district tuition runs about $7.5 million between circuit breaker costs and budget costs. The rate that goes up, the 5%, are the rates for each placement, basically. We don't know what those placement rates are gonna be at, January, December, January. Some of them come out as of springtime when the Office of the Operational Services Division identifies them and finalizes them for school districts. But we generally look to about a 5% increase per program, and some are up higher and some are lower.
Okay. I think that's all I had. Anything else? I think that's it.
Great,
Thank you very much.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I'll let the Franklin folks step back and we'll introduce the Tri-County Super.
Absolutely. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, to the Finance Committee. So a new addition this year, I think, to these meetings. We're glad to have the new superintendent, Karen McGuire, from the Tri-County Vocational School right here in town. As most people know, I take pride in trying to build relationships, and once I saw the hiring of Superintendent McGuire, I think we might have made an appointment maybe in your second week in the office, we're really excited to have her here and the staff. And so we invited the superintendent and her staff here. Not my 7 years here in Franklin, and I believe it was some years before that, where we haven't had any other of the line items that are in the school budget or in the town budget here, and it's great to have the superintendent come by to give us an update. I will note that the amount of money in the budget each year in the town budget for Tri-County is set by the regional school agreement, and essentially we get an assessment as part of that region. This is not a number that we have any discretion over. It is what it is. It's based on the per pupil expenditures. But more so than just the number that's here today, I think introducing Superintendent McGuire to the Finance Committee and the community, and just as important, and I'm sure she's going to talk about it, is for years, I'm sure many of you that have been on the Finance Committee have heard about a potential building project up at the school. Alicia and I were beneficial to go up there and go up to a breakfast earlier last fall where the superintendent and the staff up there have made a significant amount of progress on trying to move that forward through MSBA in the future. So just introduce Superintendent McGuire and take it away.
Thank you very much.
Welcome very much.
Move this. Again, I am Karen McGuire, the superintendent at Tri-County, and with me today we have Dan Haynes. He is our business manager at Tri-County, and Dr. Peter Wernicke, who is our school committee, one of our school committee reps from the town of Franklin. We also have Mr. Vozella. He's not able to join us tonight, but he is our second school committee rep from the town of Franklin. So thank you very much. We are very happy to be here with you tonight. As Mr. Halloran, I think it was my second day on the job. I don't know that it was my second week, that I had the phone call, and I was very excited to meet him. And to be honest with you, one of the initiatives that we've taken on this year is to try to come out to each of our 11 communities to meet the town government, the town finance committee, We are able to get to a few of the town meetings of the 11 communities, but unfortunately, some fell on the same night as others, but we'll be able to do that over the next couple of years. But it is important to us that we build a relationship with each of our towns. We pull from 11 communities, from Sherburne down to North Attleboro. We are a school of, right now, about 900 and some odd students. Next year, the capacity and the enrollment of the school will be at about 1,000 students. And we hope that that continues over the next number of years. Tri-County was built in 1974, opened in 1977. It is a 50-year-old building that has 50-year-old needs. The structure itself, as far as upkeep and as far as maintenance, they do a great job. The grounds are beautiful. We have a one-man band for the grounds at Tri-County. I don't know if you've walked through or ridden your bike through or anything like that. The grounds are really beautiful, and we have one man that takes care of that whole piece of our community. As far as the structure, though, we do know that Tri-County has some growing needs with the building. We applied to the MSBA. I say we, meaning Tri-County. I wasn't there when the process started. I think it was 2014 that the first application went in to the Mass School Building Authority to see if we would be able to be invited in for a renovation project. Unfortunately, from 2014 until 2019, the application was not accepted. But in 2019, Tri-County was invited in as part of the core renovation project with the MSBA. We are at the place now with that project that we are in what's called the feasibility study, which I'm sure you know is the place in the study where we're trying to determine what the best process and best action is for the Tri-County building. Our hope is that we have a renovation project. We're in the process now of determining whether that's feasible or if it's more economically beneficial to the towns to have a brand new building. But we simply don't know at this point. We're about a year away from knowing what that looks like. The architects are there off and on over the school week, meeting with all of our vocational departments, meeting with the academic departments, meeting with the facilities, and then starting now to do the tests to the systems to see what they really look like, including putting cameras down drains and doing bore samples and things like that. But again, we're about a year away from where we are. We do know that significant ADA, we need to, for compliance in that area, we need to do a lot of work and so on. We are having a community forum on June 9th at 6 o'clock, where we're inviting people from our 11 communities to come in, whether it's parents, whether it's prospective parents, whether it's alumni, whether it's town council folks like yourself, town finance committee people like yourselves, to come to Tri-County, see the building, and then hear a little bit more in-depth about the project. I'll leave the information for you so that you can have the exact time. It's 6 o'clock on June 9th, right up the street at Tri-County. As far as our budget, we, as my colleague Dr. Ahern noted, and again, she was also one of the first people to reach out to me when I started at Tri-County, which was wonderful, and she's been a great colleague, and it's been great to have her as someone to call and find out how are the roads, what does Brutus say, what are we going to do, as this year has gone on. So. But again, we have the same needs as our sister schools with social emotional situations with the students. Again, we have close to 1,000 students, and we try to keep our thumb on the pulse of what's going on with them. We are lucky the last couple of years to have about $1 million in ESSA funding to be able to increase the capacity for addressing mental health and social emotional learning and some of the other medical requirements with the COVID pandemic. And I'm not sure if you're aware of it or not, but Tri-County is at about 32% special ed students, so certainly that high number of special ed requires special programming, special classrooms, and certainly requirements with individual students' ed plans. The budget that you see here, your portion of the budget here, it represents the 16 career and tech programs that we have at Tri-County. We have everything from legal and protective services to automotive and everything in between. We're looking at adding cybersecurity as one of the programs for our computer information program and our legal and protective program. And we're also looking at expanding our capacity for adult ed programs, both during the day and at night. Our idea, and I was challenged with this during my interview a year ago, was to see if we could really use that building from the time the sun goes up until the time the sun goes down, to be able to train people to be in the workforce in this area, including adults. So that is one of the areas that we're looking at now. We've just hired a new adult director, and we're looking at what programs with the work investment boards and the industry needs in this area, what programs we need to add in addition to the ones that we have currently. So we're here to answer questions. We're happy to be here, and we look forward to a relationship with you. Come on to the meeting on the 9th, and if you can't make that meeting and you'd like an individual tour of Tri-County, let us know, and we'd be certain to make sure that that happens with Mr. Haynes. He's a good tour guide.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the superintendent?
What's, you say, what is the capacity of the current building?
1,000.
How many students?
1,000.
So you're at almost bulging?
Yeah, yes, and the, when the study was done to see what the capacity should be for this area, it remained at 1,000, so it will stay at 1,000 students. If you look at what the square footage should be for that, yeah, it is bulging. There is a need for expanding classroom size, to accommodate the 1,000 students.
And that number is some, I assume it's the total budget divided by the numbers, how do we say this? Students. That represents, I think, 178?
It's at 157 students.
57, I missed that.
For Franklin?
Yeah. So what's the per pupil in there, without me doing the math?
So our per pupil cost, I will say that we are 10th from the lowest out of the 26 reporting vocational schools for per pupil spending.
I think that's funny number, so, as you heard
Yeah,
perhaps.
yeah, we got that, yeah.
That's hocus pocus.
Well,
But it varies by community, depending on the wealth of that community, the per pupil cost. But our overall per pupil cost, let me see if I can grab that for you.
Well, I gotta be able to
I
divide.
calculated the Franklin one, if it's helpful, it's 16,170, 180,
Yep.
16,180.
So
It's
that's-
just
that's
slightly
what I-
high, it's
so-
basically in line with the,
So basically, you divide your total budget by the total number of students, and then we get 157 times whatever that number is, plus or minus, I guess.
So our per pupil expenditures were $20,797 in 2020 in that reporting period, and that's where I can do comparisons to other Voc schools. So the high is Minuteman at $34,027, and the low is Southern Worcester at $18,744. So we're, 10th from the lowest of those 26 reporting.
Told you funny money, sorry.
Who's the largest community in the Tri-County district? Which town? You
right
have
now-
the Attleboroughs?
Right, North Attleboro.
North Attleboro.
Attleboro, yeah. So Attleboro is not one of the towns that makes up Tri-County. However, up until this year, we accepted students from Attleboro because they didn't have the capacity to have the vocational programs in Attleboro. But they've since built their high school and have added 17 career and tech programs. Excuse me, so students in Attleboro will now stay in Attleboro to take their career and tech programs, with the exception of one program. The law is a little funny of how it works with career and tech ed. Any student in the Commonwealth is entitled to a career and tech education. If their district that they're part of does not have the program that they're interested in, then they have the right under the law, Chapter 74 law, to apply to a different school. So for automotive, for instance, we have automotive at Tri-County. They do not have automotive at Attleboro. So students from Attleboro could still apply to Tri-County if they wanted to be in automotive and if we had openings. We're at the place this coming year where we don't believe we'll have openings to accept students from outside of the 11-member district. But if we did, then the students from Attleboro or Bellingham, or Blackstone, or we have about 100 students on a waiting list that are from areas outside of R11. Those students would be able to come to Tri-County if we had openings.
So when Attleboro opened their building, did that relieve some pressure off the current 900? I mean, were you higher, or has increased enrollment from other towns kept the enrollment pretty much steady?
Yeah, so it's been interesting. The Tri-County has not been at capacity the last couple of years, last 3 years or so. But now this year, we expect to be back to capacity. So it has, in one way, helped the situation in that students within the district will have the seats that are available to them. And it's also not a situation where we have to really turn anyone away that's in our own district. Yeah.
And one quick question on going back to the building. You might have mentioned this, but I didn't get it. The time frame for when you expect to have a proposal for the member communities, you know, whether you build new or you build out or whatever.
Yeah, so we're looking at having the MSBA meeting in early 2023 for them to narrow it down. And then about what they're telling us is that June, July or so of 2023 for us to be able to know what the preferred design is. So it's about a year from now that we'll have a preferred design that the MSBA decides
I'm not sure
on.
who up front could answer this, or if Jamie or Chris could. When we build a school, we really have no choice but to go to a 2.5 override because it costs so much. You know, the building authority reimburses a certain percent, but not 100%. Is that correct?
That's right,
Even
yeah.
even for vocational schools?
So interesting that I'm glad you asked that. So right now, the reimbursement rate for a vocational school is the same as it is for a comprehensive school. We are, as a community, vocational community, working with our legislative group, with our organization that's called MAVA, to try to see if we can get an increased reimbursement for vocational schools. Because of the types of programs that we have, an automotive shop or a welding shop or carpentry shop with all of the equipment needs, all of the space needs, all of the things like this, we really believe that the reimbursement should be higher for career and tech schools. Right now, there are 8 career and tech schools in the Commonwealth in the MSBA pipeline, and those 8 schools represent about 100 communities. So those 100 communities would benefit if we were to get the MSBA to increase the reimbursement for career and tech schools. Yeah.
And if that doesn't happen, do the 11 towns have to go to an override route? And what happens if one votes no or a number of them vote no?
So the way the vote works is that the vote that the towns would, again, in 2023, once we're at this place, the towns would vote on whether or not they support the project. That's what they would vote on initially. Then it's up to each individual town how they would want to finance it, whether it's an override, whether they decide to fund it directly, whatever they decide to do. It's up to each individual town. But the one vote that will happen at first is whether or not the towns as a whole, the 11 towns together, support the project.
Okay.
Yeah. The finance piece is a separate one per town.
Does that have to be unanimous support, all 11, or?
So it's
6?
it's a vote among the residents.
Okay.
It's a resident vote, and it would be majority vote of the voters, of the residents.
Okay.
The vote takes place on the same day for all communities, all 11 communities would vote at the same time.
Okay. I don't think that's ever happened since I've been here, but
No.
just be
It
something
doesn't
new.
usually happen at all, usually every 40 or 50
Every
years.
50
And
years.
and given that MSBA just came into existence a little under 20 years ago, this is probably the first time that most of the vocational schools are going through their first, and probably in our careers only,
Right.
MSBA process, so.
So they were all built relatively the same time,
Yeah.
so it makes sense that they're aging out at the same time.
Right.
And it makes
Yeah.
sense that all the superintendents in them are retiring at the same time, and us people are here. Yeah, yeah.
Are there any questions for the superintendent? David?
Just on the adult ed, so first of all, love it. I've been teaching for at least 5 years there, doing classes. I think it's a great program. Is that, you want to expand it, is that something that is to try to, do you guys make money off of that? Is that the intention, or is it just a cost covering thing, or how does that work?
Yeah, not yet. So we hope to. You know, we would like to be able to get to a place where that is, but certainly not. We don't want to be a for-profit, institution like that. But what we're hoping to be able to do is to make enough money to help offset some of the program equipment costs, to help, we need fields. There's a lot of things that we need to do at the school, and we're hoping to be able to use some of that capital as capacity to address some of those needs, and then not pass it on to the taxpayers.
I think it would be, because, again, from doing the classes, and, our class costs $15, $20, we don't get the money, obviously, we didn't even know what they were charging for the class. I think it would be good if when you're doing that, to let the community or whoever's know what the money's for.
Right.
Because I think people would be probably okay with paying a little bit, it's gonna go towards these programs, go towards that, as opposed to, because I think most people just think it's going to whoever's doing the class.
Right.
Because they wouldn't know
okay.
any different.
I see what you mean.
Just kind of come, because they think they come in, it's like, no, we try to tell them, it's like, this is going to the school.
Yeah.
But they don't know that when they come in, and I think they would be more willing to, kind of put money towards classes if they knew what it was for.
Yes, okay. That's an excellent point.
Any other questions, Natalie?
I had a couple of questions. One was actually related to the adult education. I also was wondering if it was self-educating or self-funding. I've heard great things about it. I know someone who took the welding class and was like, now welder, it's fantastic. How are you planning on increasing awareness? Because I think the only reason I knew about it was because of that one person who I happen to know.
Yeah, so it's a great question too, and we had a meeting about that today. So we do need to, once we're in a place where we know what we're doing for the classes and how we're going to expand it, we certainly do need to, I think what we've discovered is that our biggest contributor to people knowing about the classes is through social media and through the school's website. We know we need to work on both of those things. The current practice was to send out a brochure to a 25-mile radius, and the brochure was, I don't know, how many pages, and Dan came in and put it on like, we're not going to do that again because it's getting too much money to print it, and it's too much money to, so we're going to now a card with a QR code that links to the brochure, so it'll save us about $40,000 and so forth. But the marketing piece of it is part of the planning that we're doing now, once we know which programs we'll be able to expand to offer, in addition to the current ones that we have.
Okay. And then the other question I had too was about the feasibility study as well. Is the plan, if you have to, I know you said your preference is to renovate, if it does end up being that a rebuild makes more sense, would the option be to do it at the same site?
So our district agreement with the 11 communities does state that the school will be in Franklin. The site, we don't have, I don't know, the site, we don't have room on the site unless we're building it like a Lego set where we put part here and move part there, and there are solar panels on part of the property. The property slopes down in 2 areas. We're hoping to not get there, but if we do, it would be on the same site some way.
Got it, okay. And then, I think you might have mentioned this, but the acceptance percentage, I feel like you said that everybody who wants to get in gets in, but maybe I didn't hear that right. Is it,
Yeah.
what's the acceptance percentage?
So it's hard to say the percentage. It depends. We're still accepting applicants right now, and it's by town. So the way that the admissions work is that whatever percentage of the 8th grade cohort your town represents, that's the percentage of 9th grade seats you're entitled to at Tri-County. So just to make it easy, you have 1,000 kids in 8th grade between the 11 communities, and 500 of them are Franklin kids. Then, and at Tri-County we have 300 seats in 9th grade. You would be entitled to 150 seats in 9th grade. And then that's proportionate among the 11. We do have some towns that do not fill their capacity for seats, like Sherburne, for instance. We have 2 students from Sherburne. I think that their seat capacity is something like, 50. Or 40. So the other seats now go back to the general pool of the students that are left from the towns that have exceeded their seat capacity. So, yeah.
So then, it's based on the 8th grade. how is the pool for the 8th grade determined? Is it just a straight percentage?
Yes, so it's the number of 8th graders on this, we use the Department of Ed's like indicator for how many students there are in grade 8 in the 11 towns. So it would be that pool. So it includes kids that are at private schools, kids that are at homeschool, kids that are at the charter schools and so forth. So whatever that 8th grade pool is your percentage of that would be your percentage of the 300 seats in grade 9.
Got it. Okay, makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You get it because you're the finance committee. Other committees are like, they're not, they don't, it's hard to follow that one a little bit, yeah, so. And it's that, and that's not every vocational school's agreement. Some, it's a ranking system of application. They take grades, attendance, behavior of all of the students that have applied. And it could be that no students from a certain town get in, so it's, some are different than others, but that's the way it is for Tri-County.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Anything else?
I have one.
Michael?
So you mentioned it was agreed upon by the 11 communities that the site is in Franklin. Does Franklin get some kind of financial benefit for having it located here? I guess, what's the background behind that decision?
You know, so we have these scrapbooks that we found in it's a true story. I think I showed them.
Yeah.
Did I show them to you? Yeah. So they're the articles from the newspaper in 1973 and 74 when the towns were fighting over where to have the school. There was a site in Medfield, there was a site in Franklin, there was a site in North Attleboro, there was a site, I want to say in Medway, if I didn't say that already, but it just kind of went on. Oh, no, Walpole was the other one. And then it was decided to put the school on the hill in Franklin, and I don't know what the benefit is to,
There's
other
not a
than,
direct
you know,
benefit, but
other
there's
than just
indirect
having
benefits.
us.
There's indirect benefits as far as teaching staff utilizing the business opportunities in town. But yet a direct financial benefit, you probably couldn't draw a straight
I just think, school there, roads, our infrastructures, our police and everything. It seems like a lot of tilt in Franklin's direction for those costs, I guess.
Yeah, we do pay for a resource officer who's a Franklin police officer.
Jamie?
Through you, Mr. Chair, so I would say, number one, when schools were built back then for vocational schools, they didn't, the town was, a fraction of the size of what it is now. Most communities were. I'm not so sure in that era, approvals of projects were really the same. They didn't really look at mitigation like we do today, stormwater, all these other things. Although I will say under the stormwater law, the Tri-County will obviously have to pay its share just like everybody else with the utility. And so they're gonna do their part. I would say that I think the biggest benefit for sure for Franklin is the presence of the school. I think the relationships with the commercial industrial sector that have been built with some of the manufacturing that is over there. So I think there's a slight advantage to having them here. I would say that our building commissioner, Gus Brown, I think we went through the committee a little earlier, they've signed on to building the pavilion at the senior center. And most notably, one of my favorites, which the superintendent was immediately supportive of, was when we didn't have a chef at the senior center, it was the first call I made. And that 5 minutes after I emailed, the email from the superintendent went to the head chef at Tri-County. They came down and served our seniors at the holidays. And the students and the head chef, Nancy, had such a great experience. They offered to come to the senior center, I believe, about once a month, and we're kind of working out some of those details. I do know, and I was going to wait till the end, but why not now? The Memorial Day breakfast is going to be cooked and served and catered by the Tri-County students, which is a great thing for the Memorial Day celebration. And I think I speak for some parents, but not maybe all. I'm sure these days they're saving on gas money, whereas some of the other towns have a longer haul for transportation. There is no direct benefit in terms of mitigation. One of the things that they just did mention that we did work out an agreement several years ago to have a Franklin police officer as an SRO, which has really been a great program for us. So it's kind of like working with a college. It's not that there's direct financial assistance in the way that we're thinking in terms of mitigation, but I think the relationship building oftentimes provides a lot of additional benefits in the ways that we've worked together that are kind of offline and maybe indirect. I don't know what the right word is, but I think the camaraderie as well as the relationship building is a big deal. And you know, obviously, you know, there's a lot of Franklin students that go there. So, you know, traditionally, like the SRO, when there have been issues like that came up, to your point, there was a cost to the police department for that. And Tri-County, the former superintendent, Steve Dockery, was very supportive of that, approached us, and our chief and the superintendent, the previous superintendent, were able to work that stuff out. And I think that if there's any other issues in the future, I know there was some around the solar farm that was put up on the property up in the back. The town assessors worked with them on all of that stuff in terms of a pilot agreement and things. So there are those kind of additional benefits, but if it was built today, to your point, Mike, if the school was being built today, I have no doubt that there would be probably a broader, there'd be broader mitigation that would go along with building a brand new school. You know, that back in 1972, I guess, you know, was far from any consideration.
Any other questions? This way. Superintendent and gentlemen, thank you. It's very informative.
Well, thank you very much for having
again.
us. We hope to see you again, so hope to see you on the 9th.
And I believe the last item is the Norfolk Aggie voc ed budget, Jane?
Yep.
And that's on a per pupil basis too, I presume?
Mr. Chair, same exact thing as Tri-County, a regional agreement of the district, and we get an assessment and a bill, and we pay it.
Do you happen to know what the enrollment numbers are for Franklin?
I don't. I know it has not shifted a dramatic amount. I think they did have a couple of additional, a few extra students that have gone to the Aggie this year, and we did invite the school staff from there, and unfortunately they weren't available. But much like the superintendent from Tri-County, I think we'll try again next year, and hopefully we'll be able to have all 3 superintendents arrive.
Okay, great. Well, if there's no discussion on Norfolk Aggie, we can move to a final vote, a bottom line vote on the operating enterprise budget recommendation. And I'll entertain a motion to approve the total budget of $142,391,586.
So moved.
Motion's been made.
Second.
Seconded. Any discussion on the motion to approve? This needs to be a roll call vote. I believe Chana hopefully is still out there, even though we can't see the screen.
She is.
So, Nicole?
Mike?
Yes.
Chana?
Yes.
Natalie?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Nicole is yes. George?
Yes.
And Bill?
Aye. So the vote is 7-0, correct?
Yes.
Vote 7-0 to approve the budget.
Excellent.
And we have just a few other items left. I don't think this will take very long. Future agenda items. I think we've covered everything the last few meetings.
Did I bring up, did I talk about I think I did it.
The podcast, yeah. It's bedtime.
No? Okay.
It's been a long week.
I know.
I'll now entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion's been made,
Second.
seconded. All those in favor of adjournment? Roll call vote.
Mike?
Aye.
Chana?
Yes.
Natalie?
Yes.
Dave?
Aye.
Nicole is yes. George?
Yes.
Bill?
Aye. 7-0. I don't have
Thank
my,
you very much.
we're adjourned. See you next time, and committee, we'll see you June 15th.
13 students, by the way.
Ah, good man.